It was a day of warm smiles, elbow bumps and disarming jokes.
We're both married way above our station.
The clear intention to play down the row over trade with Northern Ireland, which is said to dismay Joe Biden, and to move on to the big global issues.
The United States will purchase 500 million doses of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine to donate to nearly 100 nations that are in dire need.
Mr. Biden is seeking to renew American leadership in the world, so the chemistry between him and our Prime Minister may prove important. We'll discuss what it'll mean for all of us. Also on News at 10 tonight. The scientists were wrong, I was wrong, but Dominic Cummings wasn't right. Matt Hancock says he has no idea why the PM's former advisor seems to dislike him so much. 5 million waiting for treatment, 400,000 for more than a year. The terrible truth on the NHS backlog.
I've been ignored and belittled, and I don't like it. It's insulting.
The revolutionary treatment that could eradicate dengue fever and save hundreds of thousands of lives. He would have been 100 today. Princess Anne remembers her father and his love of science and engineering.
There were not many people who understood just how broad his interests were.
And behind the scenes at the Royal Shakespeare Company as they dust down the costumes, ready for reopening.
As Cleopatra, I had quite a lot of fake tan, and I would suspect that under this very beautiful garment there is sort of Harriet Walter sweat marks from fake tan that has sort of come off.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. From everything they've said and the world has seen, the Prime Minister and President Biden did appear to have gotten along today. Mr. Johnson said meeting Mr. Biden and his team had been like a breath of fresh air. Appropriate somehow for the North Cornish coast. They seemed to agree on most of what they talked about today before the start of the G7 proper tomorrow. The pandemic, climate change, renewing the post-war Atlantic Charter, and of course the two countries' historic partnership. If they did discuss the row over post-Brexit trade arrangements with Northern Ireland, they didn't mention it publicly. Privately, Mr. Biden wants Britain to honour its commitment to the EU. For now, there was a joke from the President after he'd met the new Mrs. Johnson. "We both married way above our station," Mr. Biden said. And there was a rare appearance from the young Wilfred Johnson, as well as Mum and Dad.
An old alliance, but new faces. This was the first time Boris Johnson had met Joe Biden and his wife Jill. Also the first time he could present his new wife Carrie to the President and First Lady. Her jacket bore the message "Love," a signal that America is keen to look outward again after the Trump years. But the two men's focus ahead of their talks was on the purely personal.
I told the Prime Minister we have something in common. We're both married way above our station.
I'm not going to dissent from that one, but I'm not going to disagree with the President or indeed on anything else.
Amid tight security, the leaders spoke for more than an hour on topics ranging from Russia and China to opening up transatlantic travel again. Afterwards, the President talked to the media at Tregenna Castle about how the encounter had gone.
We affirmed the special relationship, as is not said lightly, the special relationship between our people. And we renewed our commitment to defending the enduring democratic values that both our nations share.
On COVID, there was this commitment on vaccines.
The United States will purchase 500 million doses of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine to donate to nearly 100 nations that are in dire need in the fight against this pandemic. That's a historic step.
Past endeavours were on their minds earlier as they examined the archives of the Atlantic Charter, agreed by their wartime predecessors, Roosevelt and Churchill, including the bell from the ship on which they met.
That's the original bell.
That's the original bell?
The original bell.
Yeah.
The symbolism underlined by the presence of the ship's namesake, the aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales, off the coast nearby. President Biden wants this summit to be about more than just sampling the Cornish sea air. It's clear he hopes to reset relations within the Western alliance. The question is whether fault lines over Brexit will allow that to happen. Before arriving in Cornwall, the President had signalled his concern that rows over the Northern Ireland Protocol, part of the Brexit deal, are jeopardising peace. The Prime Minister was keen to play down any disagreements over that.
The United States, Washington, the UK, plus the European Union have one thing we absolutely all want to do, and that is to uphold the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and make sure we keep the balance of the peace process going. And that's absolutely common ground, and I'm optimistic that we can do that.
Away from the formalities, there was a photo call on the beach with the First Lady and Mrs Johnson, young Wilfred also joining in. The Bidens later enjoyed a few moments relaxing together ahead of tomorrow's summit.
How are your meetings going here in Cornwall?
Very well.
There was much emphasis today on the close ties between these allies, but this is the first G7 since Brexit, and the tensions over that still threaten to overshadow the summit. Libby Vina, News at 10, St Ives.
And Robert joins me from Cornwall. Robert, there were some pretty bracing headlines this morning about the whole Northern Irish question. So is this a diplomatic disaster, put off indefinitely? What's your sense of it?
No, it's definitely not been put off indefinitely. I mean, just to be absolutely clear, members of the US President's administration have told British officials and ministers that they are deeply unhappy with the way that they think that Britain is playing fast and loose with the so-called Northern Ireland Protocol, part of our Brexit deal, and they feel that there is a risk that it will undermine the Good Friday Agreement and therefore peace in Northern Ireland. Now, when it came to the meeting today between the US President and Prime Minister, actually, I'm told it was a friendly meeting. The discussions about Northern Ireland were constructive. They put out a statement that implied that progress here is possible. But this was just a sort of moment of peace before the big summit. European leaders who are coming here do not believe that the UK is behaving appropriately. President Macron has said only a couple of hours ago that he thinks it's ridiculous that the UK wants to renegotiate the Northern Ireland Protocol only a few months after we agreed it. So I think this issue is going to come back during this summit, and there is a risk. Not hard to quantify the risk, but there is a risk that it will take away from other triumphs that the British Prime Minister is hoping for.
Well, let's just talk about the big announcement of the day, this 500 million, formal announcement, we knew about it yesterday, this 500 million doses of vaccine for poorer countries. How significant do you view that as?
So just to be clear, the hope, and I think this will be formalised in the next day or two, is that all the G7 rich countries will collectively pledge 1 billion vaccine doses to poorer countries. The 500 million you refer to is simply the US portion of all of that. Now, that billion is plainly a step in the right direction, but here's the thing. Far too little vaccine is going to poorer countries at the moment. We don't know when the billion will be delivered, and the total amount that needs to go to poorer countries in order to make us safe in the UK, because if they are not safe in other countries, we're not safe here, is 11 billion doses. So this is simply a down payment on making all of us safe.
OK, Robert, for now, thank you very much indeed. While still on politics, it was the turn of the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, to answer questions from MPs about how the pandemic has been handled and, of course, accusations from Dominic Cummings that he was a serial liar. Mr Hancock rejected them in a single word. No. He stuck to his line on testing patients moved from hospitals to care homes. His promise was to increase capacity so they could be tested. He described being confronted by a worst-case scenario of 820,000 deaths, and he said his instinct was that the virus was asymptomatic before the evidence proved it. I bitterly regret that I didn't overrule the scientific advice on that at the start, he said.
For a man fighting allegations of incompetence and dishonesty, Matt Hancock was doing his best to look cheerful. Today it was the Health Secretary's version of events.
Did you ever say anything to the Prime Minister that you knew not to be true?
No.
After what we'd heard from him.
The Secretary of State for Health should have been fired for at least 15, 20 things, including lying to everybody in multiple occasions.
Dominic Cummings had promised evidence to back all that up. But right at the start of today's hearing, the committee made this clear.
We have not received that evidence, nor any explanation as to why that has not been available.
Round one to the Health Secretary, who painted a picture at times of a government in early March, scarcely able to believe the scale of what it was dealing with.
Then I remember the moment around the cabinet table when I said, we are going to have to tell everybody to stop all social contact. Right. And I remember thinking, this is the most extraordinary thing that I've ever said. And the Prime Minister said, yes, we are. You better go and tell them.
On testing, on PPE and crucially the release of people into care homes from hospital without testing, however, Mr Hancock was still under pressure.
You said, Secretary of State, right from the start, we've tried to throw a protective ring around our care homes. What was that protective ring?
Well, I think the most important words in that sentence are that we tried to. Mm-hmm. It was very hard. And all of these deaths in care homes, each and every death in a care home weighs heavily on me. And always will.
Listening to those words, Nicola Richards, who lost 27 residents of her care homes to COVID.
I think he's failed us. He's failed residents, he's failed families, he's failed staff. It's just, I watch that and I get so angry. I also get really upset thinking what we've all been through.
The Health Secretary's nemesis wasn't watching the case for the defence.
I'm dealing with TV repair van, I'm afraid.
Perhaps he'd been throwing things at the television. For his part, Matt Hancock was quite restrained, but he did add this.
The best thing to say is that government has operated better over the past 6 months.
6 months ago was when Dominic Cummings left government. Romilly Weeks, News at 10.
The grudge match, you suspect, that will run and run. Mr Hancock, though, will not have been pleased by yet another rise in NHS waiting lists in England. There are currently the sum total of 906 people in English hospitals with the virus, but the number of people waiting and suffering with other problems keeps going up and up. In March, it was slightly below 5 million, but in April, it reached 5.1 million, a new record. Nearly 400,000 have been waiting more than a year.
Now, girls.
You don't need to hear how uncomfortable Winston is. You can see it. His triple hernia is shockingly large. It causes him pain, gives him sleepless nights, and leaves him unable to eat.
I can't do things. I can't work. I can't write. I'm not interested in very much at all.
To think his operation to remove his hernia has been delayed for 2 years is also shocking.
I got a friend who's known me since I was 12, and he's seen me recently, and he says, I've never seen you angry before. And I am angry. I'm very angry at what they've done at me. I've been ignored and belittled, and I don't like it. It's insulting.
He's one of 2,500 people waiting for 2 years now, and millions are in a similar position. The number of people waiting to start hospital treatment in England is 5.1 million. Of those, almost 400,000 have been waiting more than a year. Urgent cancer referrals, though, are up to more than 200,000. That's more than double the number last year. £1 billion from the government to solve this, some say, isn't enough.
We may be looking at 10 years or more to try and address this problem. It's difficult to be specific about that, and it will vary to some degree from one surgical specialty to another. But if we're going to try and address this in a reasonable time frame, let's say over the next 3, 4, 5 years, then we need that sort of level of investment to continue.
More money could provide more specialist hubs like this one in southwest London. It's been constructed in less than 4 months, offering day surgery and nothing else.
Have you ever seen in your career waiting lists like this?
No.
What impact will it have on your list? Is it going to speed up you getting through them?
Yes, so we think about, we're looking to do about 120 patients here a week, which will be about a third increase in what the work we're already doing on our other sites.
I mean, that's incredible.
Yes, I mean, significant impact we're expecting this to have, yes.
At 72, Winston just wants things to get back to normal. He has a farm to run and a life to enjoy. The longer he waits for surgery, the further away that dream seems. Emily Morgan, News at 10.
It was users of the website Everyone's Invited that, as we mentioned last night, first highlighted a staggering amount of alleged sexual harassment and assaults linked initially to some of the country's top schools. That was in March. By April, the school inspectors at Ofsted had been called in. Well, today they published their report and they admitted even they had been surprised by what they found. As the chief inspector put it, it's not in some schools, it's in all of them. And how common is it in those schools? Well, let's put it this way, most pupils don't even bother reporting it. Of the 900 children interviewed, 90% of girls and half the boys say they've been sent explicit pictures or videos. More than 90% of girls and nearly 3/4 of boys say sexist name-calling is common. And more than half the girls over 16 complained of frequent unwanted touching.
We're going to explore some different behaviours.
At a school in North London, a group of teenagers are learning what healthy relationships look like.
Until they said yes, it's not consent. Until they're happy to go, willingly to go, then it's not consent.
In a world where 9 out of 10 girls and half of all boys are sent unwanted explicit images, this kind of lesson is crucial.
Are we doing enough?
But with no budget for it, the school is having to rely on help from the specialist relationship charity Tender to staff's frustration.
This isn't just happening in education. You know, this isn't a school-only, education-only problem, which I think sometimes the focus is on. None of us are experts, and we're having to learn and make sure we are the prepared we best can be for the young people.
The Ofsted review itself points out that sexual violence between children often happens far beyond school premises, in parks and at parties, and often online. But it found some schools lacked a grip on the scale of the problem in their own classrooms and corridors, with damaging results.
The single most shocking thing is the normalisation, the fact that so many young people, especially girls, are just accepting this as something that's part of normal life that they have to put up with, that's not worth complaining about. That truly shocked me.
You found some of your own inspectors weren't robust enough when it came to sexual harassment, and yet these issues were flagged up in a government report 5 years ago. Why has it taken so long for Ofsted to confront it?
In the next inspection framework we started building not long after that report was published, we built in explicitly a strand to make sure in every inspection we ask for information about sexual harassment and violence. We analysed the evidence from that and we found that only 6% of schools provided us with information. A far larger proportion gave us a nil return.
Lily's account of her own school's complacency in the face of sexual abuse was one of thousands that prompted Ofsted's emergency review. She hoped for more on earlier intervention.
So a catcalling year 7 who just hollers at you like down the hallway in 5 or 6 years then could be like spiking a girl's drink and then raping her. And I feel like the line needs to be drawn a lot quicker.
Ofsted is calling on every school to develop a culture where all kinds of sexual misbehaviour is sanctioned. But if teachers are left to cope alone, too many children will keep the everyday reality of sexual harassment firmly locked away. Rachel Younger, News at 10.
Now, while so much scientific effort has gone into vaccinations for the coronavirus, a new way of preventing another deadly disease, dengue fever, has been developed, and it's rather intriguing. Here is why it's so significant. Dengue fever kills around 40,000 people every year, many of them children. The virus infects up to 390 million people a year, spread by mosquitoes whose habitat just keeps on expanding, from 9 countries with outbreaks in 1970 to more than 100 today.
Nearly half the world's population now lives at risk of this rapidly spreading, life-threatening disease. Here in Indonesia, dengue fever is endemic. In the city of Yogyakarta alone, thousands end up in hospital every year, placing a huge burden on the health system. It's spread by mosquitoes. But now scientists have made a breakthrough. Here they are, releasing mosquitoes into the wild, except these ones have been treated with a bacteria that stops dengue fever in its tracks. The result, a 77% cut in cases.
When it's in the mosquito population, it puts up a great big red stop sign to the dengue virus and stops the mosquito population from being infected with the dengue virus. If the mosquitoes can't be infected, then they can't transmit it to humans.
Scientists found that treating mosquitoes with a bacteria called Wolbachia stops them from being a good host for the dengue virus. So they released thousands of the Wolbachia-carrying mosquitoes. They bred with wild mosquitoes, passing on the bacteria. After several generations, most still carried the bacteria, unable to efficiently spread dengue.
At this laboratory, researchers are studying the mating habits of mosquitoes. Scientists say this new method that's shown such success against dengue fever has exciting potential for other diseases like Zika virus and yellow fever that are also spread by mosquito bites.
The World Health Organization has declared dengue one of the top 10 global health threats. But scientists hope this development could eventually wipe it out worldwide. Rebecca Barry, News at 10.
Isn't science a wonderful thing? And on a kind of similar subject, on what would have been Prince Philip's 100th birthday, he's been remembered today by his family, among many others, and especially his daughter, Princess Anne. She chose today to let us show her presenting a medal in his memory for engineering. It reflected one of his interests, like science, and hers. Not many people understood, she told us, just how broad those interests were.
For 30 years, the Prince Philip Medal has been awarded to an engineer, but never to a female engineer until now.
It's my privilege now to be able to hand it over.
We were invited to Princess Anne's Gloucestershire estate, where she presented the medal which carries her father's name. She handed it to Dr. Gladys West, whose mathematical modelling of the Earth in the 70s and 80s enabled engineers to invent GPS positioning.
My father, of course, he was a naval officer, but he was also a navigator. So for him, your work has been particularly relevant.
This is just too much for me. I am really joyful about this. I'm so pleased that I am being recognized. It's me who's being recognized.
Ever intrigued by how things work, Prince Philip founded the Royal Academy of Engineering in 1976.
We all have to move on, but I think it's worth remembering just those sort of, the importance of those sort of events.
In all the coverage there's been since the death of your father, a lot of people have said they just learned things about him they simply didn't know before.
Yes, I think you're right. I think there were not many people who understood just how broad his interests were and how supportive he was of an astonishingly wide range of organisations.
You told a reporter at around the time of your 70th birthday that actually if you weren't a princess of the United Kingdom, that actually you might well have been an engineer. Do you think you've got that from your father?
I think that's probably true, because I think if anything broke, there was always a manner, have a look at this, see if you could mend it. I mean, you didn't throw things away. I mean, I'm that old. That often comes from your own family background. Anybody who goes through Royal Naval training and spends time on a ship, and you have to mend and make do. You have to make things work and be practical and adjust.
And a practicality which Princess Anne said shaped her childhood, like her father's famous barbecue trailer on the back of his Land Rover.
The trailer was designed specifically for that role, and everything had a place. And you needed to know where that was. And then it worked really well.
On the day he would have turned 100, Princess Anne remembered a father who was forever intrigued by the world around him.
I think your life experience makes a huge impact, and he'd seen a lot of it. So, yes, he probably asked more questions than he gave opinions. He was always good at that.
Princess Anne, of course, speaking to Chris. Now, when the Scotland football team plays its first match in the Euros on Monday, it will mark a long overdue return to international competition. The last one they were in was over 20 years ago, so no wonder their fans are beyond excited.
They say the best things in life come to those who wait. At Hampden Park, after 23 years absent from major football tournaments, Scotland's hopes at the Euros are high. Training today at their camp in Darlington, they know the challenge in the days to come.
I think for us as a squad, we're looking to get out the group stage. I think we've got a great team. We've got some top players that play at the highest level, so I think get out the group stage and we'll just see what happens from there.
We get beat 3-2. It was so close.
Among their legion of fans, Tartan Army stalwart Andy Redmond. His living room wall a shrine to the team he's followed through thick and thin. He can't wait for their first match.
Well, there's going to be, is it 12,000? Can make a lot of noise, even if it's just echo. I'm really looking forward to it. Really, I can't express how much I'm looking forward to it.
So welcome to Wembley.
But in their campaign ahead, England await. In Euro 96, the oldest rivalry in international football left the old enemy breaking Scottish hearts. David Seaman denying Gary McAllister's penalty.
A brilliant save!
And Gazza's genius proving too much.
A super goal for England, and it's 2-0.
This group of players have a right to be there, they've earned it, and I think they'll put a good show. I think they'll be underestimated by a lot of people, maybe even themselves, and I think we'll surprise a few people.
Scotland have a tough run ahead, facing the Czech Republic on Monday, before heading to Wembley next Friday for their England match. The following Tuesday, it's back to Hampden Park for Croatia. The Tartan Army hope that Scotland will get off to a strong start here on Monday. Some bookies have them at 250 to 1 to win the Euros. But this is a team determined to show it means business. At Glasgow's fan zone, they're gearing up for the end of their long wait, as Scotland expects. Neil Connery, News at 10.
Finally, with theatres opening up, plays and performances can't start without the actors obviously having something to wear. Well, we've been behind the scenes at the Royal Shakespeare Company, where they've been running up new ruffs, darning old doublets and steaming the cross-gartered yellow stockings.
They are back. After 15 months away, during which time some used their skills to make scrubs for the NHS, now they have returned to what they were trained for in the biggest costume-making workshop in British theatre. On display today, some iconic outfits, these from Antony and Cleopatra, reunited with their original wearer, who has mixed memories.
I don't like to say this, but as Cleopatra, I had quite a lot of fake tan, and I would suspect that under this very beautiful garment, there is sort of Harriet Walter sweat marks from fake tan that has sort of come off in my excitement.
Preserved for history.
So I don't know whether that enhances its value or very much detracts from it.
Who would Fardels bear to grunt?
From Hamlet
under a weary life.
Your mother hath consented that you shall be my husband.
To The Taming of the Shrew. The workshop, newly redeveloped and now open after an £8.7 million fundraising campaign, is responsible for tens of thousands of pieces kept in the nearby costume store and reused for stage, TV and film. Now there is another production, The Comedy of Errors, to prepare for.
This I actually finished before lockdown, and then I am just finishing the collar and the matching cuffs, which will really finish it off.
How good is it to be back at work?
It's really lovely to be back at work. It was a really long time.
The Royal Shakespeare Company is currently building an outdoor theatre to seat 500 people, so that regardless of what the government says next week about the further lifting of restrictions, here the productions will be back on stage.
It's symbolic of a kind of transitional moment. People may be nervous about coming straight back into an indoor theatre, into a 1,000-seat theatre, but perhaps sitting in the open air, watching one of Shakespeare's funniest plays, as it happens, one of his shortest plays, may be a good thing.
So it is full steam ahead. For the RSC's skilled teams, it is a symbolic moment. They are needed once more to create the costumes that the actors will wear when they at last face an audience again. Nina Nanart, News at 10 in Stratford-upon-Avon.
Well, as the great man once wrote, good night, parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say good night till it be morrow.